Against that.
You're doing the presentation.
Good? Yes. All right, everybody, take over. We are streaming now. So we'll call the meeting to order at 9 o'clock, nice and punctual, thanks. Metro Vancouver Transit Police and the Police Board respects the Indigenous nations within Metro Vancouver and acknowledges all First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people for their continued resilience, sustainable stewardship, and as active members of the community for generations to come. We recognize that working within and managing the region's transportation system, we have a role to play in supporting reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. All right, so thanks everyone for being nice and on time, and thanks for your help on getting me ready for the first meeting. So let's start. Consent agenda. Anybody want to pull anything from consent agenda to discuss? Okay. Anything else? Okay, can I get a motion to approve consent without F and J in them? Great. All in favor? Good. Okay, so let's talk about F, which is the report.
What I just wanted to say is, again, I think sometimes, especially in this atmosphere that's out there these days, we are focusing on some of the challenges. And although this is just, I'm sure, a very small set of things that are happening, some of the men that are out there working in the field and so on, there was one in particular where there was the senior being helped.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the type of stuff that I think we just need, as a board, always sort of remember, and I bring up very often, to really appreciate the effort of all the leadership team that obviously represent all the officers who are out there doing all the good things, the things that we should be doing. And I think at times we need to spend a bit of time to talk about that with the leadership teams, the community groups, and whether you're still on the streets, that put their lives on the line every day.
Yeah.
And it's just important that we know that and encourage citizens to talk about some of the good stuff.
No, that's great. Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks for pulling that out. I always enjoy reading that report. It's my favorite report. Favorite of all the stuff I read. Oh, great. How about Jay?
Jay, I just had a question about the board. BC Association of Police Boards, the amount of $975 is about $81 a month. It seems low when we hear about what it's doing, and Murray, I know, is on the board. I'm just wondering if, I mean, that's more than you spend at Starbucks each month, Marnie. But I'm just wondering if we're going to support what the police boards are doing, and Murray, you know this through the conversations you have, is there something more that we and our other fellow boards should be doing to provide the kind of funding that's needed to get the service? I mean, $81 a month just seems to be a very small amount. I'm not suggesting that the number of the due of 975 isn't being well used. It's quite the opposite. I'm just wondering if there's something more that we as a board and our colleagues on other boards should be doing to support the association. So you sit on that and maybe have some.
Yeah, thanks, George. I agree that, at this point in time, the BCAPB is evolving, I guess is the way I would describe it. There seems to be more attention being paid to the BCAPB as the voice on behalf of all the independent boards. I guess there's 13 independent boards now, jury being brought on. The problem that BCAPB faces is that it really wasn't set up to always act as the voice on behalf of all the police boards. So one of the priorities for this year has been discussed in having a strategy session that talks more about what resources do we need in order to properly represent the police boards. And so the $975 is an increase, I think, of $100 over last year, but it represents probably more an inflationary increase than a substance increase in relation to what's actually possible. So a lot of the work is done by the BCAPB now, and we'll actually get into this discuss the camera agenda volunteer work. So, people take on the task of drafting a letter or chairing a special committee or whatever. But it really isn't that effective because we're all busy starting. So I think there will be a change. The question of how much the amount will be next year will be subject to the discussions that go on at this strategy session between the members that are on the board. But there no doubt will be an increase. And the expectation is, right now, the staffing at BCATV is one part-time person doing kind of jack of all trades kind of work. So she keeps the minutes, she organizes the meetings, she arranges for meetings between the chair of the BCATV and the provincial government or others that may be interested in presenting to the BCATV. But there isn't enough time left to actually prepare reports, the summary reports of the kinds of items that are being discussed. And that's something that in my mind leaves us at a disadvantage as a group of police boards because as an example, the letter that was drafted to ECOM that talks about the shortcomings of ECOM and needs to address them was drafted by a fellow from, the mayor from Oak Bay. And it's been circulated to the police board, and now instead of going through the process of being finalized, he's sending it to ECOM. But that is a lot of effort, volunteer effort by a lot of people to make it happen. And I don't think that's the most effective way to have issues dealt with that are important to policing. So I tend to be off the corner of somebody's desk as opposed to sort of critical of their work. So I'm making a long answer out of a short question, but it really is important that the Cabinet Association represents us properly with the resources needed to undertake the work. There's a backdrop to all the things that the association should be doing on behalf of the board.
No, that's great. And we do have an agenda item a bit later to talk about the conference and maybe supporting that too. So that's great. No, good point. Okay. Any other discussion on those two? All right. Can I get a motion to approve SJ then?
Second.
Thanks very much. All right. Public delegations, Karen?
Nothing.
All right. So now we have a presentation. So, doing that?
So just, we kind of picked each quarter, we've got presentations. Today will be on the general investigation and crime suppression teams, criminal intel unit, and the area that Chris is.
All right.
That's why. Mouse, try to click OK. There we go.
Sorry, everyone.
No problem. None of us could do any better, so.
Can you all see? Do you want to perhaps?
I know, forget it.
That item?
Sure,
Do-
do Chief Officer
Other
report?
things.
So
Do you guys?
perhaps while we're playing with this, we'll move on and just use this part of it, we turn it over to Deputy Chief Quillen, her staff, or our staff.
Sure.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of one event that we just had. So we had the first ever Women's Leadership Day here at Transit Police on January 25th, which went over extremely well. So we had 23 of our sworn members attend, and we were actually upstairs in this room. And that included a presentation by the BC Women in Law Enforcement and what their association does. And with the support of the chief, we have provided membership to any of our members, not just the females within the agency who wish to be part of that association, both sworn and civilian. As well, we had a presentation from retired Sergeant Lori White of the RCMP, a member who had her leg shot and actually amputated back in 1998 and up north in Kitimat. And so her story of resiliency. And then we had 3 TransLink executive females come down and do a panel and just give us some insight into how their lives in the corporate world and what challenges they have as women in a private or corporate sector. And then we had, I brought in the other deputy chiefs, the females of Vancouver, Delta, and Port Moody, and myself. And we had a panel discussion as well. Those deputies sat at the table for lunch with our women. So went over extremely well. And if we can, we'll be making that an annual event for all of the women, and just to acknowledge that there are nuances in women in policing, particularly work-life balance and family and child rearing, and it was really well received. And it also allowed our members, the females from the west and the east and specialized units, to have some time to get to know one another. So a really excellent event and something I'm very proud of, and I want to acknowledge the work particularly of Michelle Hansen, Suzanne Muir, and my EA, Sandra Boliak, who isn't here, who put in a significant amount of time to make that happen. So that's my overall update for what we did on the ops side, and then I'm just going to turn it over to Staff Sergeant Michelle Hansen, who will go over the operational updates.
Good morning, everybody. Just to give you some updates from ops side. In December, our operations inspector, Dex Hoover, he had the opportunity to go to Qatar. The 2022 FIFA World Cup was occurring at that time, and he was invited to be a representative of the World Observer Program to look at how Qatar dealt with safety and security planning. Inspector Hoover also made numerous contacts there. There were representatives from Vancouver Police Department, Toronto Police Service, and when he came back, he did numerous presentations to all the squads and the entire organization. So lots of great learning points from that as we prepare for 2026. Our patrol officers have been busy. Some of the highlights over the last couple of months is they've worked with our jurisdictional police agencies, resulting in finding lost children in and around the station. Also, active threats in the community. They've been arrested as a result of the excellent work they've been doing. We do get phone calls in terms of some encampments in and along the transit property, so our officers, with compassion, during those winter months, helped find alternative places for those individuals to stay. Our officers, our patrol officers, worked in conjunction with our jurisdictional police and business stakeholders to address thefts from businesses. And so over a 2-day project, about 23 investigations were had, resulting in 8 files where charges were approved. Also, over the last several months, there were numerous medical emergencies, and our officers used life-saving measures, CPR, AEDs, applying tourniquets to really save lives. That's what they did out there. New Year's Eve, there was a flash mob at Waterfront Station. Over 1,000 people were there. Our officers worked with Vancouver to quickly take control of the situation, resulting in really no injuries or issues. Again, we do deploy naloxone throughout our courses of our duties, resulting in lives being saved. At the end of January, Patrol Division worked with Metrotown Mall and JLL Properties. They partnered with them to do a training exercise in regards to an active shooter. So that was very well received, and again, our officers' relationship building within our communities. That is my report.
Thanks, and then perhaps I should, if you hadn't met, I believe Michelle's been here earlier. Michelle is Staff Sergeant, runs the west side of the operations right now, and is one of Dex's replacements, so thanks, Michelle.
Thank you. I'll introduce Suzanne.
Okay. We'll continue. So I'll begin with, Operation Support section. Sure. I just have a couple of visuals because I think it really maybe depicts some of the good work that our teams are doing. I'll see how this turns out. We may or may not have visuals. And as they come up, I'll kind of start and then as we go through them. But to begin with our community engagement team, we have a new Constable, Ben Hayward, who's taken over in the mental health liaison role. So we've kind of rebranded that, the name of the position, as well as we're looking at opportunities. Yeah, if you don't mind. Next slide, please. And that's, you can see Ben on the left side. So we're looking at manners that we can make, as he's a community, the uniform more noticeable and presentable, whether it's with, kind of lettering or whatever we have on it, but we're hearing clearly from community ways to be able to more, easily identify these individuals in this portfolio are helpful. And then certainly looking to explore potential funding opportunities. We'd like to look at that model with a nurse and our mental health liaison, so that's something else we're exploring. Next slide, please. Thanks. Over to our canine unit. I think many of you have met or seen our accredited facility dog, Norquay. We're looking at social media and opportunities to really, kind of share Norquay's story with our members. Next slide, thanks. And as you can see, that social media presence has gone up significantly. And what I'll talk about is just going back to Ben in the mental health liaison portfolio. In Instagram, that Bell Let's Talk had over 1,200 hits. So good to see the role getting more notice, and also, of course, Norquay with further coverage. Also, Norquay supporting members, but looking at our Susan team and how to get that kind of support with our team as well. Thanks. Over to TMAT, so a drone pilot project. So we're looking at introducing, and it will be a pilot. The two focus areas will be on enforcement and contained scenes. We do have some grant money that we will look to kind of move towards that. A project team's been established with a sponsor, a lead project manager, and legal Oscar. Thank you, looking at that privacy impact assessment. So we look forward to updating on that more as things unfold. And finally, next slide. Our Operations Command Center. So we have a consultant review that's currently ongoing. The project's just kicked off. They have a 2-week kind of data analysis that's occurring. And then it'll be a 6-week project, and the focus is really kind of examining what are our current practices, processes, and technology. And then with that lens at looking, as we know, with the lines expanding, that future growth and any other potential expansion opportunities. And that's it. Thank you. Unless there's any questions, I will next turn it over to Inspector Chris Mullen. Let's see.
Now, this is kind of going backwards, right? So perhaps just a pause there where there was questions for Anita.
Yeah, maybe Suzanne, you said they're doing a review of the ops.
Yeah, the Operational Command Center.
So with the intent of what does it look like if we do expand that?
Yeah, I think there's several things. I think first and foremost, there's so many changes happening with NG 911, really, and also looking at what are current, practices, and really getting subject matter experts. So the consulting company we're utilizing does have extensive experience in, communications center examinations. So really trying to see what are those opportunities. And then, as mentioned with Broadway and Langley, we do have to look capacity-wise to increase. And then, thirdly, as referenced, if we look at with West Vancouver currently, with us and really examining is that effective model and/or is there opportunity for, potential future growth there as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And when would you anticipate this is complete?
Yeah, so we hope to, so the data review will happen in 6 weeks, then we'll have a chance following that. So approximately, I would say in 3 months, we should, have something we can share more robustly with the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And just to emphasize on that, one of the key things is we've done a lot of reviews and you've seen models for growth. The comm center is one when we talk about this increase at the Broadway and Langley. And, it's one of those key areas that I don't think we have recognized. We haven't focused on what will it need to look like.
Right.
And the opportunities that exist there, so.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and the final thing I'll add, it's also looking, so in the event, if there's a major incident, we actually have an off-site command center as well that we can move into. So, aside from the consultant, that is a priority for 2023 for our team as well.
Great. Thank you all for your reports. Maybe I'll finally get on Instagram to follow the dog.
Yeah.
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 Go ahead.
Question. Thank you for your presentation. Great. It's just, and we said about being are you working with a nurse or?
Yeah, no, not currently, but, just, again, looking at best practice and kind of, that is the hope. So we're exploring what are those opportunities. Of course, obtaining funding will be the key component. So, what grants are there, what partnerships can we develop? But certainly that model, I think, is that ideal one where we are having, a police officer who is partnered with a nurse.
Right. And then currently that the mental health liaison has changed, the role is kind of rebranded or different role.
Yeah, so we're really looking at building up. I mean, there was and not to say there was really good work happening previously, but I think we're really examining going across where are our partners, where can we really partner, who have programs in place, and, also looking at the clients that we most encounter, within the transit system and kind of identifying them. So we're just looking to approach it maybe just from a different lens. And kind of strategies. And a lot of us, it is driven by, we went out to community and we liaised with people who, provide services in this area. And these are some of the recommendations that we continue to hear over and over, and they're ones we're going to prioritize.
One last question for Michelle. Did you know about the flash mob in advance, or was it like, it just happened, 1,000 people showed up at Waterfront and they had to manage that, or what?
Well, I was home, but, I wasn't there. Maybe in my teenage years I would have, but no. We didn't have social media then.
Yeah.
How would you get together? No, it just was spontaneous, and so it was dealt with really quickly and efficiently. So no, often we have avenues to monitor social media. During certain events, we look at what's happening during protests. But for that particular night, my understanding is there was no notice of it.
So. You were mentioning that because it did make the news, and so.
No news is good news.
Yeah. Quiet and, okay.
Any other questions?
I think just before we go on, did you have something under the admin? I see it's got ops and admin before we jump back to Chris.
Sure, yeah, I can do that now.
Perhaps
Let's do
finish
that.
this section
Yeah, that's really
before we jump back.
Yeah.
Sure, okay, and I'll turn over the first part to Inspector Graham for support services update.
Good morning. Just by way of training, in this last quarter, we trained all our members on the new naming conventions, which is a new provincial standard getting ready for the digital management system, which I believe Staff Sergeant Henningsen presented on before. We did a training day with our Blue Eagles program. We had them out at the regional training center. We did some basic, just kind of safety, some jiu-jitsu stuff with them, and we also got to put them through our simulator. So it was a lot of fun for them and good exposure for our training group as well as them. We've already talked about the Metrotown model scenario that we did with Odd Squad, Burnaby, RCMP, and ourselves. We were critical and the lead in planning for that. And we also managed to complete and get everybody through all our qualifications throughout the year. So we just did our audit in that, and we have everybody qualified. When it comes to recruiting, we had 4 new hires that started in our January class. We also are currently processing our CSOs and currently have 14 applications in already on our CSO program. We held an information session on January 18th, both for our CSO program as well for our regular police officers. And we recently did presentations at the JIBC for the law enforcement students, both on a recruiting and basically on a law enforcement presentation by itself. And we also did a presentation recently at an immigrant job fair on our recruiting side. For facilities, level 3, which is in this building, we have kind of officially now taken over and moved in. We've set up new training rooms, our multi-purpose rooms, new meeting rooms, and moved all of the sections into their areas. And for our fleet and our vehicles, our 2021 vehicles have finally arrived. Just to give you a bit of a sense of where we are, we don't know where our 2022 vehicles are. And we're about to pitch for 2023, but we just, in December, received our final 2021 report. So we're starting to get caught up.
Apparently, some while waiting for chips have had the batteries run dry, they can't charge, and there's a battery shortage.
Thank you, Bryce. From Finance, so on January 27th, we received approval to draw down on the enterprise contingency funds to fund an IT service desk position, which is good news for us. This is $86,000. That transfer won't be reflected in our budget until Q this year. Our interim financial statement audit with KPMG went smoothly last November. We had WorkSafe BC auditor come in to review our 2021 payroll records this January and the negative findings. We closed our 2022 year-end and final report. Results will be shared with the Finance Committee later this month. We're gearing up for our 2022 year-end financial statement audit in February of this year and completing other year-end reporting activities such as variance, etc. And we're working with the new Enterprise Resource Planning System, ERP. We're doing user acceptance testing, and we expect to go live with that in April, subject to further comment and feedback from Transit Police. From the CSO program, lots going on there. Development of training continues through CPKN. We've planned a 10-week program, and it's designed to build and develop skills on an incremental basis. Interviews with those interested in the sergeant position to supervise the CSOs was completed this week, and we've made a selection. The CSO webpage continues to generate interest, and we currently, as Bryce said, have 14 applicants. Kit and Clothing obtained approval for a pocket badge, ID card, shoulder flash, uniform shirt, and other standard equipment items. And through consultation with former CSOs, so sworn members here that were CSOs elsewhere in other departments, BPD, etc., we followed up with them with respect to their training. What they said was really valuable was scenario-based training. They wish they had more of that, so we've built more of that into our training. And Inspector Hicks has delivered a presentation on the CSO program to BCRTC executive and to representatives of the OPCC, which was great feedback from both those groups. And then finally, a mock-up of the RAP vehicle, a CSO vehicle, what it will look like, its decals and so on, was submitted to the chief, and that's been approved for use. From information technology, two-factor authentication is halfway complete with respect to installing it on computers throughout the organization. The patrol writing area at both HQ and at Bridgeport has had their VDIs, so the virtual desktop machines. We've had those replaced with physical desktop machines, and we expect that to continue. We've also received 11 sub-office printers, and those will replace the old printers that are spread throughout the organization. And we're still waiting for further printer refresh equipment to arrive, hopefully the end of this month and into March. Again, it's the supply issue that we're facing. The multi-purpose training room and conference room in the annex, newly renovated area that we've acquired, that's set up with AV and Zoom connectivity. And then we've acquired 20 laptops for the multi-purpose room, and those are being re-imaged for training purposes. And Wi-Fi connectivity at Bridgeport has been set up and tested, as has Wi-Fi at this building as well, and hope to go live with that later this month. All transit police employees designated as hybrid workers, so those approved to work from home and at work, are being provided with cameras for Zoom meetings, and then also we're authorized soft phones, so software installed on a computer that allows an employee to make a call through a computer. Those will be designated those will be assigned to designated hybrid employees as well. From Human Resources, exempt compensation, Clark Glassford continues to work on that. Job reviews for 3 exempt manager positions and 4 exempt advisor positions are nearing completion. This reorg started last year in April in an effort to recognize the expertise of our staff and keep those positions evaluated and competitive with a pay structure that is equal throughout the organization. And HR anticipates completing that at the end of this month. There's also a wellness challenge. HR launched the first organizational wellness challenge, and there's been great fanfare for that, and we anticipate success as we roll that out further. And that's it from Admin Services.
Backbone of the organization.
Exactly.
I have a question about the CSO. How many are coming out of the volunteer? How many applications? The 14?
Out of like our waterfront volunteers?
Yeah.
Just over a third of them.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, George.
Just a couple. One, longer-term planning, because you mentioned facilities. And so down the road, with all the different things that are happening, CSO and everything, what's the status of this? Are we going to outgrow this space at what point, or are we adequate for the next 10 years? And what's kind of the thought process going forward about what requirements are going to be? I know there's been discussions in the past about is New Westminster the best location for it elsewhere, but timing-wise, as a organization and as a board for planning?
I'll defer to Bryce here. Bryce is actually working on a plan right now.
Yeah, so we are pretty close at capacity for here in our current staff person station. In 2023, we'll be running a feasibility study out towards the valley, so more like Surrey Langley area with the expansion, to look for a space there and the possibility of doing like a decentralized headquarters. So we'll be split between here and there. So we are running a feasibility study right now. We do have funds from TransLink to run that. We do have a project manager assigned, and that's just in the process right now. And we'll run a feasibility study to find out what the best course of action for us is.
And just to follow up on that, just given what we've seen that's happened in Turkey and Syria with the earthquake, this building itself, is it built to withstand a major earthquake?
I couldn't answer that, honestly. It is a recent built building, so I'm sure it met code standards when it was built. I think it's probably 10 years old or longer, this building, so what the standards are. So this building here is actually leased by TransLink. It's owned by the West Group. So this is a bit of an assumption that, yes, they built it to the standards that are required.
Because I know that the Econ building out by the PNE was apparently built to withstand, given your communication and everything is here.
Right.
I mean, what happens? And I think that's just, again, planning going forward.
You have that more often. We already kind of covered that off on that earlier when it comes to like communications, where if the system goes down here, we do have time like to run a backup system that we can quickly transition to in order to keep operating. And that is an advantage of us also having more than one location. When we're here, we're also at the basement. We're not just stuck deploying on one place. That is an advantage that we have.
The issue of space is of concern in the future of it, and it ties into so many aspects, like including recruitment and retention, where you can't, even as an employer, not having your employees drive so far into work, deployment processes, and the fact that we are spread out so far. So as we look to potentially put a headquarters and deployment office further into potentially the Surrey Langley area, which would be a benefit to our members not coming, we recognize that we're deployed over such a wide region, We still need office space in the Burnaby West area, in the Vancouver area, and in the Richmond area. We try to look at whether, we call them, you'll sometimes hear sub-offices. So a sub-office has all the amenities of home, if you want to call it, computers, locker rooms, stuff that you can go in and it's a sub of the office. Then we have hub offices, which are in the field, where members don't have to return to the sub office or head office to do their work. Basically computers, maybe washrooms, a place to go do work outside of the vehicle. And so we look at and then we classify things as deployment. What are our key deployment offices? And so we keep the cars, keep the major equipment, communication staff, admin staff, and where members will congregate to get their equipment and then be dispersed. And so we will be getting another office at Canby and Broadway. It's a subterranean office, but it's not a deployment office. So it doesn't have change rooms or anything in it. So that's where Bryce has got, Inspector Graham has the funding and the consultant working on providing the funding for us to have the consultant and look at how much space do we need, where does it need to be, and where is it. Hopefully that would be completed sometime this year, early next year, with options as to do it.
Well, and through the chair, I think that maybe, because probably a lot of this will happen long after we leave as board members, but I think it's our duty to kind of think about going forward and perhaps later in the year, spend a bit of time understanding what those things are and what the implications are, reimagine something.
Yeah, exactly, and also just disaster recovery in general, right? What's the plan there? So we could put that on a future meeting, just so that we're aware of the risk and the mitigation for that risk.
Instead of much like either in this meeting or another meeting somewhere, a presentation where we lay out what is happening, whether it's consultant present to talk about it. It's a very interesting process.
Okay. Yeah, let's put that on notes. Thanks, George.
I have a comment and a question. So the comment, I support the idea that you guys are supporting your staff who are working remotely to equip them with the proper equipment. I think that's great. Even though we've been at it for about 2+ years, but now you guys are doing that, which is great. Just a question on your auditors, KPMG. Are they the same auditors as Transit? That's a question.
I don't know.
Okay. I think it is. The KPMG does Transit and the police. Under the sub. Yeah. KPMG does police at the same time. Thank you.
Can you get Michelle's other pen for me? My pen died.
All right.
Kristen, we'll go back to you.
Yeah.
Spin up.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to give a bit of a presentation on the General Investigations Unit and Suppression Team, Criminal Intelligence Unit, just a snapshot of some of the highlights from last year, and also a quick look at some of the investigations or types of investigations that they engage in. What you'll see, common theme throughout this presentation is the collaboration that goes on between our units and the POJs, or JPDs. I know it's hard to read, but it's just as far as the General Investigations Unit is concerned, last year we had a 37% increase in recommended charges. And the top 4 are sex assaults, common assaults, mischief unders, and indecent acts. You can see from the chart there that we had our hands engaged in a number of various offenses and crime types. Our solve rate for the files that we take is at 89%. Now that doesn't necessarily result in charges being recommended, but it does speak to our ability to figure out what happened, who's who in the zoo, and even from a strategic or intelligence perspective, it's been good. We've also, and you'll see later in the slide under our Criminal Intelligence Unit, been very effective in providing our partners with information, given the access we have to CCTV, that's assisted in identifying persons of interest in a lot of their offenses. Just in general, like I again, 10 more people arrested last year than the year before. And this just goes to show the number of investigations we worked on with our POJs, Vancouver being the largest, followed by Surrey and Burnaby. But we were able to assist all municipal departments and detachments with a lot of the files that they had going on last year. Just some highlights, some of the from last year, some of the more significant investigations. So the first one, there were 11 incidences where suspects shot a pelican at windows of moving buses. This was in Vancouver. The individual was charged with 11 counts of mischief and 11 counts of possession of a weapon. It was an extensive investigation that we worked with Vancouver on, so good success there. Another significant file we took last year and is still ongoing is a fatal NDA that resulted from a suspect who fled two of our crime suppression team members. That investigation is progressing very well. We're about 85% complete on disclosure. We'll be submitting that to Vancouver Regional Crown Council for charge assessment once we receive the collision report from the RCMP. Recommending charges of dangerous operation or motor vehicle causing death, flight from police, and prohibited driving. Of note, the suspect continued his behavior following this incident in fleeing from the police. So efforts were made by us in collaboration with Surrey and Burnaby to follow up with his continued behavior. And he's currently now sitting under house arrest facing additional charges for transit. Next one's just an aggravated assault slashing out of the Hilton Station. Both suspects pled guilty to that offense in court. This is a series of indecent acts. Again, as a result of the CCTV that was collected and analyzed, we were able to identify a suspect. He was interviewed by our members and provided admissions to all of his offenses, and he's been deported as a result. We have a child porn investigation ongoing. I can't share too much in the way of details, but I can share that we did a search warrant. We executed a search warrant at a residence in Coquitlam, and we've since recovered approximately 2,000 photos of what we believe to be child pornography. So we'll be recommending charges on that file. And just in a couple of weeks ago, again, robbery with a knife at Patterson SkyTrain that occurred in October of last year. Both suspects, charges against both suspects for robbery and assault with a weapon have been approved again with the CCT coverage that we have access to. It makes charge approval a rather easy process for Crown in a lot of cases. Just over to our criminal intelligence unit, just in terms of some of the general tasks that they're responsible for. They weigh in heavily with respect to deployment of members, events, things of that nature. They work a lot with our POJs on event planning. They disseminate a number of officer safety bulletins and tactical intelligence products throughout the organization, as well as to our police partners. They spend a lot of time assisting patrol and specialized units and engage in a number of regional initiatives and meetings, such as our PTEP meetings and our prolific offender meetings that are held throughout the Lower Mainland. So this is just a snapshot of what they kind of produce monthly. This was December's month end, so you can see where they supported our own units with identifying suspects. They supported our general investigations unit with a project that's underway right now. And then again, under miscellaneous, you see the number of bulletins that they've sent out and some of the POJs that we've been able to assist with some of their initiatives. One up there being, us being able to refer a youth to CFSU's gang exiting program in order to have them remove from the gang life. Crime suppression team, so I'll just highlight 3 files, again, as a snapshot of the type of investigations that they work on. This was a result of a surveillance done on a black Range Rover outside the King George SkyTrain station. A suspect's known drug trafficker, he was pulled over, and a large quantity of money and drugs found in his possession. And quite often what we'll do is we'll refer these assets, the money and any vehicles and whatnot that we seize as a result of these investigations over to civil forfeiture, and they're quite aggressive at making sure that the drug traffickers do not get their property back. This is an interesting file from November. Coquitlam RCMP received a report of groups, suspects brandishing firearms at a Chrysler dealership. The suspects fled and later exchanged gunfire with the RCMP. And one of our members, who happened to be just monitoring kind of what was going on, actually located the suspect vehicle in New West here and was able to surveil the vehicle, put it down, and the suspects were arrested without incident. So they really do have their ear to the ground with respect to what's going on in other jurisdictions when they're out there. So, and this was just a file last week that we assisted Surrey RCMP with. Again, it was surveillance on 2 suspects led by our crime suppression team. They were associated to a stolen vehicle, later loading stuff into a cab. The cab was taken down, and they found evidence with respect to production of a controlled substance in the cab. So that resulted in a search warrant being executed on their residence, and these are just some of the exhibits that were seized as a result. Also, our crime suppression team, they've been part of a couple projects. Last year, Project Allure, we've since recommended charges to PPSC. This had to do with a couple of suspects in the West that were PTEP targets and drug dealing. And then this year, well, last fall and into this year, we received a $150,000 grant from the province's PTEP funding for an investigation into those who are part of the Lower Mainland gang conflict, where there's a nexus to transit. So we're working with Surrey on that. We'll certainly have more details with respect to that investigation as it unfolds and we're able to share. And with some of the bigger files that we're working on, and just, again, with the complexity of some of those investigations, we've identified some training that will sort of remain ongoing year to year. But the last one, the Team Commanders course, just to make ourselves in line with provincial standards, we're going to seek to send both of our general investigation sergeants on the Team Commanders course this year. I'm just working with Bryce to magically get 2 seats on that course. It's pretty sought after course. And lastly, with respect to Team Commander accreditation, I made some notes here that I'll refer to. So it's a program that's integrated within BC. All participating agencies within BC participate in this program to some degree. And accreditation is given to those who pose and who have demonstrated the necessary KSAs to lead complex criminal investigations. So within the transit police, I've identified 1, maybe 2 members who are relatively junior, who I think fit the bill for this accreditation. And through the course of their career, if we're not able to provide opportunities here at transit to check some of the boxes that need to be checked in order to meet the accreditation criteria, we'll perhaps look at loaning them out to specific projects that will give them the development that they need in order to meet this goal. So that's just something that I'm working on over time. That's it.
Great, thank you.
Someone has any questions?
How do officers get assigned to the teams? Do they express interest, or what's the process if they want to be on one of the teams?
Yeah, no, there's a competition, and I think support has to come from their supervisor, And then there's an interview process that takes place, and then they're ranked. And what we try and do is, there's always full-time vacancies we try to fill, but also to where if patrol is flush and there's an opportunity to bring someone up on a mentorship program for 6 months, that's always in communication between us as senior managers as to when we can do that, because there are people that are interested in those short-term kind of.
Do they rotate out after a certain amount of time?
Yeah. So I think the tenure right now is 3 years in these specialty sections, and yeah.
Right, okay. Any other questions? Sure.
I know you were focusing on 2022, just a question. It seems recently in Toronto, and then I heard last night Winnipeg is putting $5 million towards security on the system in Winnipeg, the transit system. Is this a national issue that's happening, or is it isolated to Toronto, Winnipeg, or is there a pattern that's out here that you folks, I'm not too sure who answers that.
I'll take it. So we have actually had discussions, I would tell you, in the last several months with either Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, Toronto, and Halifax, and Montreal, I think, in terms of it. And there has been a call for a national symposium, and we've talked about that. Transit Police did host one years ago, and that. So I think the trends we're seeing, we're not experiencing them to the same degree, but we're the only unique program that has designated police officers, our policing unit, I would call it. So we're not just in some agencies where they have police officers assigned or part of a section within a bigger department, but here, like, our commitment and dedication is to that crime on, and we call it on and around the system, so that we're able to interject with it and focus and establish these liaisons with, as you indicated, we're, say, working on a project with Surrey, the individual is tied to transit and, is either using the system or using us to a degree, so we can partner together with it. So we're not experiencing the same level of increase, although we're very much aware as people return to transit and as our transit system matures even further, there's a real emphasis over the years of more and more being pushed to transit. Communities are being built where they're talking about not having parking spaces in development or reducing the number of parking spaces and really pushing people towards that transit model. So I think we've been fortunate so far in terms of it. So.
And just, if I may, I think that's so important for us to continue to get that message out, because I agree. I've always said it reminds me more of the British Transport Police, where it's police.
Yes.
It's not security officers. It's not information people wearing vests or something like that. That the future of our system here in Metro Vancouver, which will only grow, it's going to be based on the feeling by ridership that they feel safe at all times, day or night. And that they're comfortable at all times, and they know, and the visible deterrent piece is so important. That's why I think you was here before saying we want to see the officers out on the platform, whatever. But I think that story needs to be told to ensure the folks in TransLink also recognize, as some of the surveys show as well, that this is one of the reasons for ridership to return and grow. So that's good.
Yeah, so, yeah, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No.
Sorry, I just had one,
Okay, yeah.
are you going to follow up on that?
I was going to comment on that, just
Go
to
ahead.
say,
Go ahead,
I wondered with the media attention to Toronto and Winnipeg, if you were getting, requests from those departments saying, you're the only transit, police in the country, right? And so, I just anticipated hearing, we're going to Toronto, we're going to Montreal, we're going to Winnipeg to provide, in-service and training in terms of what we do. So, yeah.
We're fortunate to have a Constable Steed here, who is our media person, who works 7 days a week. Perhaps Amanda can comment. She get a lot of queries on it.
Yeah, I bet.
Recently, in the last, I think, couple of weeks, since we've noticed an increase in the violent attacks in other provinces.
Yeah.
I want to say, probably close to 6 or 7 different interviews.
Yeah.
From want to discuss sort of the nuances of how transit police keeps our system safe.
Yeah.
And with them experiencing such a high increase in violence against passengers and staff, they come to us looking to see how can we do this?
Mhm.
How can we change this? What can we do?
Yeah,
We're doing lots of things.
interesting. Yeah.
I think the other advantage is with the CSO program, that enhanced the, potential perception of safety for persons utilizing transit.
And that is a key because a CSO here has some authorities to take action in certain places versus if you're in some communities across the country, it'll say like they're designated fare enforcement officer, so that's it. I can enforce fares, nothing else.
Yeah.
And that becomes it. So, it's a place we're pushing people to transit of all walks of life, from the business to the person who's going shopping or going to a community event or going to the theater or going to a sporting event or just traveling to go shopping or whatever. We're pushing everyone there, and the idea is the safety measures. And I'll always emphasize, though, part of it is people, and then part of it's technologies, and that as to how we design it and the technologies we have available. So one of the things we need to emphasize is, as Chris has indicated, we identify who's responsible for what's happening 89% of the time. And that is really high if you looked at the Polis Stats Canada on clearance rates for police files. Now, clearance rates don't mean you laid a charge, it means you identified who did it. So here, we're very high, and mainly because of CCTV.
Yeah.
So we really need to emphasize that this is here.
Yeah.
Sure, I think George had a.
Don't know, you go ahead.
Firstly, thanks, for a really good presentation. I learned a lot, and, thanks for the work that you and your team are doing. I noted just, on the range of types of issues you deal with, sexual harassment, sexual assault, those types of issues. Obviously, as we looked at our strategic plan, it's been a big focus of, perception of safety and safety of the system. I'd be curious from your perspective, with the resources you've got, do you feel like you could be doing more with more resources? Do you feel resource constrained, or are you able to accomplish what your goals are for your team with what you've got?
Well, if you're offering more body count.
Didn't come with an offer, yeah.
No, it's quite manageable, and we have a good working relationship with patrol. We're moving in this direction again, where we want to mentorship our patrol members to actually carry through on their investigations. So, with that relationship, it is quite manageable, right? And there will always be that priority file that comes in that we need to drop everything onto it, but it's not too often we can't get back to what we're working on. So, and again, I think just with the CCTV being available to us as it is, and with everybody knowing where to get it, it's pretty quickly in our hands. And again, with CIU, making their magic, it's not too long before we identify a suspect, and then we're kind of off to the races.
And I know this has been years in the making of pulling this all together and the shift in focus, and it's great to kind of see the impact it's had, right? So.
And that's part, this is the part we have to do better messaging on, and we're trying to, saying, if you're going to do this, you'll get caught, you'll get arrested, you'll get identified, and we'll address it. I don't want to say arrest is always the magic answer to things. So it is. So just on the numbers, I agree, Chris, the workload is manageable, but if the workload increases or we lose resources, we're at the right point, provided we're fully staffed across everything, and that's the problem, is the fluctuation. So, and the other one just is, we do get great cooperation with our jurisdictional partners. So when Chris referred to the vehicle collision, which was given, ours, because they took off from one of our cars, the RCMP have provided, a lot of resources, right? The collision analyst teams, interview teams, they provide a lot in assistance to it. So that ability to have relationships across the Lower Mainland, or the Vancouver file with the pellet gun shooting, acknowledge it. Vancouver Police Department, their beat teams, we were working with them, they're working with us. That's how that comes to a conclusion, right? So it's not all the time just left onto our own devices.
Go ahead, George.
Just one brief question, and it's not around 2022 numbers, but January 31st, we have the decriminalization. You folks talked about what that might mean. It's only 10 days into it, but has GIU or any other part of the organization, has there been any noticeable situations that have emerged in the first 10 days?
I don't know if we've really looked at it in the first 10 days. Michelle's more front line.
Every day our watch centers do a daily duty report, so, they've been instructed if there is an incident or something to report on in regards to that, they'll put it on there. So I've been monitoring those. Bryce and myself are part of, a committee internally within Transit Police to get the information, educate ourselves, educate all our officers, civilians, and members on how to deal with it. So one of the things we do is the questions we're getting from our stakeholders, our candlelight attendants, our SkyTrain attendants, bus operators, they have reached out to our officers. I was just on the phone yesterday with a patrol member who said, they're looking for some more information. And so this is new and we're all sort of, keen on top of it. But in essence, there is a rule, officers can speak about it, with more articulation than I can, about, a rule that we can enforce if someone is consuming on-transit property. So, we're monitoring it and like I said, everybody's affected by it and, yeah, we'll continue to.
Yeah, like smoking, drinking. Just because of Sean's question about resources, and thanks, Chris, for the presentation. You mentioned the child pornography. It just seems like an outlier. I know maybe you can't discuss the case, but it seems like the type of crime that you wouldn't typically be investigating as transit police. So are you working with jurisdictional part? Like, the training for that would be specific and unique, I would think, to police forces. So it just seemed like an odd one out there, like what?
It started at a SkyTrain station.
Okay.
With seizure exhibits.
Right.
And then we built it up to,
Okay.
Working with our criminal.
And you are working with, okay, yeah. Yeah,
So, often, and again, without getting into too much detail,
Right.
it's really open, but often, like in most of those spots, if not all, there's a nexus to transit, either on the system
Right.
or in and around the system.
Right, okay, yeah.
Good? Good. Great, all right, thanks for that. Thanks very much for your presentation. All right, on to strategic plan. We've got Stephen on the line.
I know, I'm going to speak to it. Stephen has decided to be the last one in the country to get.
To get COVID.
That's right. Five shots later and nobody else, so that's it. We're looking into this. So I can give you a bit he sent me an update, so, in terms of it. So, just so you know, for the public meeting here, significant items have been added since the mid-year report, which include the approval of the Community Safety Officer Program, and I'd report here is that we recently received an email communication that the training program has been accepted as well at the very high level. We'll receive a letter very soon. That's the last legislative kind of hurdle for us to have cleared. So now we're free runway to develop our training, hire the members, and get going, right? So there's no impediment or barrier from the government side of it. So we'll get that letter, but we have an email reassurance that's done. We've been dealing with additional safety campaign signage added to busy SkyTrain stations about public safety and policing and that. That's one of the things we tried to take a look at, is just how much signage is there about public safety. There's a lot about safety and that, but sometimes the public safety message is not as pronounced, so we're looking at that. And we had completion of a new equity, diversity, and inclusion policy with related training for staff. That's occurred since the last update. Key performance indicators continue to trend in the same direction, which is good. Reporting Q3 with the crime rate falling due to higher ridership. So I just want to point out, we said that during the pandemic, that when ridership dropped, the crimes per 100,000 riders went up, looked like a big skew. Now as ridership's returning, you'll see Sometimes we've given you in one of those charts raw data numbers, so the percentages are returning to what we had seen before. There's a substantial increase in police agency partnerships and initiatives and community events attended. There's been a lot. They have really stepped up, and I don't go home anymore. I just ask Shiraz where I have to be next, right, in terms of it. A noted increase in the number of mental health apprehensions performed by officers. This is a critical thing, and just so you're aware, the TransLink board also has an interest in this. It is a key thing, an indicator of this. We still have a high rate of admission, in the 76% range, which is high compared to other police agencies. And just because they're not admitted doesn't mean that there wasn't an issue at the time. I always reiterate, police officers have the ability to apprehend if they believe the person's at risk of danger to themselves or others. And so it's not just because someone is having a mental health episode that we can do it. There has to be a risk of danger to themselves or others. Sometimes you get to the hospital, person may be provided medication and they don't need admission, right? Sometimes individuals already have medications that they may have come off of for whatever reason, and they're able to get stabilized and released. So turnover amongst police officers, again, we had the recruitment of policing is going both ways. We see that the City of Vancouver is hiring more police officers. Surrey, although that is paused right now while the government continues to look at it, and the RCMP, of course, have started up a lateral campaign. But thanks to Bryce's office and that, last year we did recruit a significant number, I believe it's 24 police officers, including exempts and contract police officers that made up part of that. And of course, recruitment of CSOs will be a top priority going through here. I believe we've actually had interviews of at least one of the CSOs, probably be a leading candidate to be the first one who would come in. And yes, he comes from a volunteer pool. So in terms of it, so he knows he knows he's been interviewed. So in terms of it, and there is some additional KPIs that we'll talk about later. There are some new items we've got in here, such as response time to calls for service and jurisdictional files being transferred, where we have no baseline. So we're establishing those baselines. So that is the open part that Stephen wanted to pass on.
And how often does that data come in for these KPIs? Like, is it monthly?
I think it's monthly that they look at it. So they do a monthly review. PATCO and them generate the data and stats to fill it up.
Okay. Great. Any questions from Stratplan? Go ahead.
Thank you. Just in relation to, this sort of is a fundamental document that guides and directs the work that is undertaken by the police service. And George and I were having breakfast this morning and just talking about the, I guess, the amount of time we spend looking at this in comparison to the volume of work that went into developing it, and even more so the volume of work that's being undertaken by the police service to implement the pillars and the recommendations. And I guess from my perspective, it seems like it wouldn't be a bad idea on a regular basis for us to have meetings that just discuss the strat plan and also go through it sort of recommendation by recommendation, so we better understand more specifically what's going on and why, and where help is needed and where where resources are being expended. So it gives us a better basis upon which then to act as a board in dealing with the reports that come forward that are more incidental to the KPIs. So that would be my perspective.
Okay.
And I'm not criticizing, but just saying that it really is a pretty fundamental part of why we exist as a board.
Yeah, and I think we do have that, on our list to look at how can we better interact with this information. So that could be one way, or different cadence on reporting, shorter reports, more. We can discuss how we want to.
I guess de facto you're right that we do kind of get information on the different elements, but we don't necessarily link it
right
the way we should. Strat plan.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you, Marnie. Just on your KPI on the turnover rate of percentage, I know it's like plus 7.1%, but if you can just add some more color to that?
Sure. So normally, and I'll go to Bryce here too, but normally we've averaged a certain percentage of members through the retirement or turnover have gone. Last year was an exceptionally higher number, so.
Yeah, I think I did a presentation on that a few weeks ago, but we came up pretty close to even this year with retirement and sales leaders as well.
Just to be clear, so, and the mechanics of it, when an officer retires or someone retires, it's counted as the turnover rate? Is that what you're saying?
We look at it, simple line, it's almost a plus minus.
Yeah.
So we'll categorize it and how we're leading the organization.
Yeah.
Like last year, we had a fair amount of retirements. This year, we're gonna have a fair amount of retirements as well. That's what we're kind of seeing across the region. There were huge hiring sprees in kind of the early 90s, we're seeing with every organization. So,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, thank you for clarity. Yeah, it's just that some organizations, when retirement, they don't, they normalize it, they don't include that, but I just wanted to get, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments about staff line? Go ahead.
And just to kind of follow up, I think it's a great report, because we do get snippets, I mean, throughout the course, but by bringing it together, and as Murray just said, by linking it, I think this was gonna go up on the website because it's a public document, so that's good. But again, to me, it just banged that drum of, this is so important to demonstrate that it's not an organization of a bunch of fare evader ticket people. I mean, the work that's being done here, and it's still out there, I mean, unfortunately, you know, the perception is, you probably don't, me as folks that might be encountering others, and they say, well, I didn't even know there was a transit police, or what do they do, don't they just give out tickets? I certainly believe that now that COVID is coming to an end, a spokesperson like our chief would be great, taking information like this out to 2 or 3 major community events, Chamber of Commerce, places like Langley, where you're gonna be extension and so on, but done in a concerted effort in kind of a short presentation with all the positive stuff, and working with the jurisdictions. The number there of 134% increase demonstrates the respect that obviously you folks have developed with your jurisdictional partners. And I think we need to do more of that, because if we don't talk about it as an organization, nobody else is going to. And I know work is being done, but I think there's different levels, and Stephen and the team and so on are gonna work on that. But this is the time when so many good things are happening in the expansion, so.
Yeah, and we do, just so you're aware, so we do the either city council or police board meetings. In fact, we will be in Richmond coming up next week or the week after.
Because I'm coming with you.
Oh, yeah. I try to remember, look, but we do that, everything, but you are right. I think there are larger Board of Trade meetings and that, where we need to emphasize this, and that has been part of it, is developing and improving upon, not only telling people what we do, but the reputation and perception as to what the role is of this. And it's always an interesting dichotomy between, there is a place for we call it revenue protection, and you know, and the fares, and we remind people it's not just an enforcement campaign, it's engineering, it's an education. So, you know, as to how you're going to protect fares, and the interesting thing is just we have a real shift in some of the society where we've already seen kids 12 and under can ride for free. Some places think it should be up to 18 years old, and some think transit should be free for everybody. And those are policy decisions at a much higher level of government than myself, for sure.
Great, thanks for that, George. All right, any other comments or questions? Move on. All right, next item was the BBD report on the Thin Blue Line. So we did receive a copy of the report. We had previous discussions about it, and we're waiting, sorry, my voice is going, waiting for this report. So I thought it was a really well-done report. It was thorough, gave you good background. So it will certainly help us inform our further discussions. Did the board have any questions or comments about that? Go ahead, Murray.
Thank you. Yeah, it was an interesting report. I guess what caught my attention was the differences, you know, between our policy and the VPD policy and the RCMP policy. and other independent police services. And whenever I see differences, that's tends to support those people that want to demonstrate that our policy is wrong, as opposed to it being right. And so it's one of those things that, from my perspective, having now received that report, whether we need to sort of more in-depth discussion about what our policy should be. I'm not suggesting it's wrong, but I do think we need to pay attention to it.
Yep.
And if we don't, from my perspective, some could view that as an abrogation of our responsibility to properly investigate everything, especially with additional information coming in.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, for sure. We need to have further discussion, bring it back through committee. Yeah.
And that maybe just make a motion that we refer this to the governance committee.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
the discussion, we can bring back to the board later. We obviously don't have Chief Palmer here, who would be good to speak because it's his report. We'd also like to hear from our leadership team, but I'd like to move that we take this to the governance committee at an appropriate time later this year.
Sure.
So maybe in that context, I'm wondering if maybe what we need to do is hear from Chief Palmer, sort of in advance of us discussing it at governance committee, just so we get his take on it as well.
Item, maybe you can join by Zoom for that item.
Sure.
Although I do think that, the whole board hearing what he has to say might be helpful as well in the context of making a decision to either reinforce the current policy or change it.
Right.
And I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud here, because I realize it seems like a small issue if you look at it on its own, but in relation to the community's interest in it, I think there are members of the community that may be interested in making an issue out of it. And so we have to make sure that whatever decision we make, we all understand the rationale.
Absolutely.
And we promised we'd bring this back, which would be for discussion at this point, and that's why I'd like to see us refer it to the governance committee.
Not on the topic of what you're about to decide, but I would suggest that if you're going to have Chief Palmer speak to it, that you would invite your other board member, Maureen Levy, whose agency also has an opinion on this, which is similar to the VPD policy, that they don't wear it, but I would suggest that you would invite her to that discussion.
I think she's on the phone, isn't she?
She's not, actually.
Okay. Okay.
But perhaps then, just to amend that why don't we move this down to the governance committee for discussion, but prior to that, maybe have a discussion at the next board meeting. So that we have everybody here. And everybody hears the same thing, I agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm good with that.
makes sense.
Okay. Great. You've got that noted, Tara? Okay. Great. All right. So, on to other business, and that is Finance Committee. Alex Murray, over to you.
So the only finance meeting that's been held since the last board meeting was a special meeting of the Finance Committee that was held after the priorities meeting on January 30th. And the Finance Committee met to discuss I'm just looking for my notes here, sorry. Met to discuss the approved budget for the Transit Police Service, if I can just find them here. And the approved budget basically reflects what was put forward to the Transit, to the Translink Board. The Translink Board approved the budget with three civilian positions approved, with annualization of the CSOs that were approved in last year's budget for part year's funding, and then 12 additional CSOs to bring the complement of CSOs to 24 for the pilot program, which runs for 3 years. And so the intention is to have first CSOs brought on in the second half of this year, and then continue the recruiting process and onboarding process over the course of time to get all 24 CSOs up and running. And then normal inflationary increases to salaries and to other administration items that are covered within the budget, all of which leads to a total increase of in the budget of about 12%. So it moves from about $42 million and change to $45 million, or almost $46 million. And so the Finance Committee discussed it, recognizes that what is being proposed is consistent with what's been discussed on the individual items over the course of time, and are prepared to recommend that the budget that was approved by the TransLink Board now be received as information and de facto approval by the Transit Police Service Board. So that's the report on that element of the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee will be meeting later this month with a full normal agenda, including the year-end results for 2022. And we've had some preliminary feedback from Jancy on the year-end results, which the variance between the budget and the final year-end numbers are larger than was anticipated, but it primarily relates to, I've forgotten the word she uses, but basically administrative carryovers in relation to overtime allotments that weren't taken, and vacation allotments that weren't taken that have to be then monitorized in the budget. So at this point in time, our recommendation is that it be received as the final approved budget be received as information by this board.
Okay. All right. Any discussion before we?
George and Bill, did you have anything to add?
Yeah. It's good.
So we do have that recommendation we have it to approve.
To approve, sorry.
To the Transit 2020. 27. All in favor? Good. Approved. All right, over to George now.
Just on the governance committee, the minutes kind of speak for themselves. They were part of the consent agenda, so that's available to everybody to review. We did have our first meeting of the year in January 24th or something. And the main focus, I think, going forward will be around some of the policies. As a board, we'll start reviewing some of the policies in 2023 and how our authority works with regards around policies. So we'll be reviewing that along with the chief and the leadership team going forward. But other than that, it's, I think, for interest and sake of time, it's pretty well available there.
Okay, great.
Unless you have anything to add.
No. Good. Yeah.
Good. All right. Great. All right, so any other questions from governance? Good. All right. Next item was committee membership. So kind of reaffirming, we didn't make too many big changes on committees for this year. So we do have a recommendation here. So first off, to appoint Director Hotel as chair of the HR committee, and Directors Palmer and Farmer are reappointed for 2023. And the reappointment of George as chair of the governance committee and Directors Dinwiddie and Hotel are also reappointed for 2023. And the reappointment of Director Dinwiddie as chair of the finance committee, Directors Shannon and so those remain largely the same, other than Carl moving into chair on the HR board, which we appreciate. Any questions, comments?
So moved.
All right. All in favor? Great. All right. Committees are set. All right. The final item on our agenda is the BC Association of. There's a couple of points within this one. We were talking a bit earlier about supporting the organization. So they do have a conference coming up. We have sponsored in the past as well, so that's on the table for discussion. And then we do have that letter that they sent us to about implementing an awards program. If we want to look at doing that, if we want to participate in that, there is a fee to do that. Obviously, it would be some committee work as well to actually implement that program. So I'll open it up to the board for their opinions on these points.
I'll speak to the awards letter that was sent out by Charlotte Huber. The intention, the genesis of that was about a year ago now. where Charlotte felt that given the media, the negative media attention around policing generally, required a response. And in some respects, the awards program was seen as being an appropriate response. In other words, highlighting the good things that policing is involved with, as opposed to sort of saying, no, that's not true. And so she, with a couple of other volunteers from the BC Association of Police Boards, developed this program with the intention of not making it mandatory anywhere, but allowing police boards to become engaged in, administering an awards program, separate and apart from the, what do you call it, the Chiefs Awards?
There's the provincial awards, which is
like the annual.
The annual, they're not the Order of Merit, I'll call it, the Police Honors Night.
Right.
So there's the Meritorious Service and Valor Awards.
So in some respects, it's, you could say it's a duplication of that. And when I was reading the agenda this week and I came upon the compliments report, I was thinking to myself, it might be difficult for us to sort of isolate one incident to sort of say, well, that's the one that deserves an award, because it's not so much magnitude, it's impact. Right. And I think every, no call too small kind of philosophy to policing reflects that. So my sense would be this, that in relation to the awards program, we should become engaged in having it available to us, that making a decision around how we administer it maybe requires a discussion at a committee to decide, how often and how the decisions regarding the awards should be made, I think is an important consideration, because the last thing we want it to be is discouraging to people by having people that are engaged in delivering police services not be selected after they are become part of a process. So I think that's something that a committee needs to discuss and decide upon, and then once those discussions have been held, that we just talk about it at the board level, maybe at a strategic session, so we all agree that it's fair and reasonable and defendable and would be encouraging to all.
Right, so define criteria, you mean?
Right. So I know there's basic criteria provided within the letter, and I think fundamentally it's good. But the question of how do we differentiate and how do we select in a way that's going to be generally encouraging, I think is an important consideration.
Yeah, in line with what we're trying to accomplish in our strategic plan.
And then with respect to sort of being members of, or being involved with the annual conference of the BCAPV, from my perspective, I would encourage us to stay involved, at least at the level that we have been involved at, which is sponsoring, one of the coffee times, I guess. And I don't know what the value has been traditionally, but we should find out what that value represents, and then I would move that we support that level of contribution toward the conference.
Yeah, we have the amount, right?
Yep, 500 in the past for
Yeah.
coffee break, and that's what
That's
they're
right.
asking again.
Okay, so I would, from my perspective, make a motion or move that we provide a $500 contribution to the BCAPV annual conference for a coffee break.
Okay. I'm okay with that? Yeah, I'm okay with that too. All good. Okay. So we'll approve the sponsorship request of $500.
Maybe I'm sorry if I may indulge with respect to attending the conference. I'm the appointed representative to the BCAPV, so I feel like I should attend as a minimum.
Yeah.
If others, want to attend, I'm good with that as well. But I would request that approval be given to fund my attendance at the conference. And I think it's May 25th and 26th. I can't remember the dates. Yeah, 25th and 26th, which would include the registration and
travel.
Hotel, yeah.
Travel, yeah. And I think, Bill, did you express interest in?
Thank you. Just a couple questions. I'm interested to know whether this is a well-attended event and whether all the major police boards in Metro Vancouver are part of this too, and then whether they're actively engaged in this.
Yeah, if I can respond, I would say yes, they are. The question of the conference being effective, I would say that there's highlights within the conference, but it's a small group. Like it's 13 boards, each of whom have a volunteer member sit on the executive committee.
Yeah.
And the agenda for the conference was attached to the today's agenda for our meeting. And I would say that there's a concerted effort being made to sort of jazz up the conference as much as they can, recognizing that the items that are on the agenda, some of which are programmed and people already have presentations available to make, and others are more ad hoc in the context of things like the World Cafe, where items are identified for discussion, and then discussion kind of flows freely in the context of groups that are organized at the conference to discuss the items. And then there's a final synopsis prepared that's circulated to the police boards as information, and then hence to the police, the directors on each of the police boards. So I would say the conference, it is what it is, and I think it's good for us to continue to participate.
No, I agree.
And what I said earlier about there needing to be a more strategic approach to building capacity at the association to really address the fundamental issues that the association should be addressing, I think that's a work in progress.
Yeah, to answer your comment, I am interested because I'm just thinking of that. It may just help me and continue to really onboard quickly and trying to understand how other police boards navigate to, especially in the governance and strategy, and looking at these other police boards that are in this jurisdiction that we cross over.
I'll provide sort of an editorial comment. Last year's conference was in Surrey, and I caught a presentation, was I think the last one of the conference, was by Gary Begg. He's the MP for Surrey North, I think it is. But he was also on the committee that, the special committee that made recommendations regarding changes to the Police Act. And his presentation kind of lit a fire, to be honest with you, because he made some comments about where and how the recommendations that came out of that committee's work would be applied. And the people that were at the conference from these jurisdictions felt a little aggrieved that he pointed a finger at them. And so I think those are the kinds of things that, from my perspective, are healthy, but they need to be managed in a way that we don't end up with people offside, that there's an understanding and there's a conversation around a recommendation. So some of the presentations are pretty dry, and others need to be carefully managed so that we don't end up creating animosity as a result of presentations being made. So I think it was a demonstration to me of the need for us as boards and as an association to be careful to manage the content of the presentation so that it is constructive and not destructive in relation to relationships.
Right. Go ahead, George.
Thank you.
So, I think we should participate for sure. Hopefully there's going to be a video connection from the folks this year, where they're not going to?
I don't believe so. I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen anything about that.
Is that right?
So I don't.
Okay, that's too bad. Because I think that's about the value for those that don't attend. You can, it's easy with Surrey, but Nelson, not so much. The other thing was that I think the content is, and Murray, maybe you can provide some advice as well to the committee that's organizing this, but the value often is just actually the conversations that take place at the table. And then I would mention that from last year, very much like Oprah, our chief, you'd have to pry the microphone out of his hand.
You do know I've been invited back to do that with Charlotte there?
He was down in the audience and talking. You're running overtime in the first hour. But it is valuable in terms of the actual conversations with others. This is our association, and the only way it's going to get better is by us and each organization participating, being there, making suggestions, creating events during the time there, and supporting anything we can. So I think it's great that Murray would be going and if Bill can go there. It's too bad that they're not going to be able to, because they do it with CPA.
They're great at
It's always good. So.
When's the deadline to decide for members to go? Is it, I think it's
The end of March, I think, is the,
End of March we could probably send people later than that, but that's.
But yeah, you gotta book,
Exactly.
Yeah,
it would be a little easier if it was in the lower lane last, to be able to
I'm driving.
get more
Oh, it's like a 9-hour
You're driving to Nelson?
I will go to, I have a place in the interior, I'll make a stop.
Yeah, going to Kelowna.
The challenge is just the time of year is flights. Flights get canceled quite often.
Yeah, just because it's cloudy.
And
Sometimes you drop someone off at the airport
Yeah.
and say goodbye and forget to look for the plane on the runway.
Enjoy.
I've been there before.
Carla, I dropped her off.
Yeah, so we've got a couple people
Good luck.
kind of definitely interested, so maybe you can make a final call on that and then let Taryn know.
Okay.
As to, wants to go, we've approved the sponsorship of 500 and we'll, maybe put the awards back to committee. Maybe discuss. Just to talk about whether we.
Would it be the HR committee maybe? I don't know, I'm just, the governance committee's already pretty loaded up. I hate to say it that way, but
Sure. Yeah, we can take it.
Just to see about process,
Yeah,
right, about
yeah.
if we did do it
Yeah.
well, like.
Yeah, I think that's
whether
probably.
we can swing that or not, right, you know, workload and
Sure.
priority as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Okay. Do we need to approve, do you want to do an approval of the registration and related
That
travel?
would be great. Can we, so can we get an approval on the books for Director Dinwiddie and Director Chan?
Sure.
And if your schedule doesn't permit it, that's,
I checked my schedule, it's currently available. I took a quick check about the logistics, which is a bit challenging, but,
Yeah,
but I'm just thinking if I don't go, I'm not quite sure of my schedule next year, so
right,
I just gotta be mindful of that if I have this window, it should.
okay.
But anyway, I'll give you the answer hopefully before the end of February.
okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do the approval for the registration and related travel costs, for directors Dinwiddie and Chan to attend, on May 20.
Thank you.
Good with that? All right, so that's, you've got the sponsorship one too, we got that one, right? All right. Great. Well, that brings the regular portion of the meeting to a close.